Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
Pollster and host of the Political Trade Secrets podcast, Dustin Olson.
Dustin Olson.
Dustin Olson.
And Dustin Olson, pollster at American Pulse. They work for both Republicans and Democrats. And he hosts a podcast, Political Trade Secrets. Oh, we love that. We like that podcast.
Now, from Washington, D.C., is pollster Dustin Olson.
And welcome to Political Trade Secrets. I'm your host, Dustin Olson, managing partner at American Pulse Research and Polling, as well as Olson Strategies Advertising. And wanted to just thank you for being here for our new episode. In this episode, we're going to be talking crime in the city, our new New York City poll that came out in the last week, and we've done a couple over the summer as we head here into the fall campaign. Hope you had a great Labor Day weekend, but a lot of important races. They're happening here in the odd year, so thank you for taking the time to join us. I would love for you to like, to follow, to subscribe to the podcast anywhere you enjoy podcasts, X, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is. Please do follow the show. That's a great way to support what we're doing here. And if you're interested in our polling, go to pollingclub.com and you can sign up to get this poll and future polls. Also help determine what topics we cover or where we decide to do our polling for our public polling. But earlier this week, I was actually on Newsmax's Wake Up America, and Charlotte and Mark asked about this topic, about crime across the country, about tackling it, and ultimately our New York City poll, which got into that topic.
I mean, what about this DC takedown? I think the people are going to actually like it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's having a murder-free week. It's been about 12 days, I think, since the last murder. That's pretty amazing. And you have a city like Chicago that they have a murder a day. Other cities would like to have this. Actually, last week we did a poll in New York City on the mayor's race, but we spent some time talking to them about crime. And 85% of New Yorkers say that crime's a problem. 50% say it's a serious problem. And it's interesting. We're talking about cashless bail today because of the president's executive order. And 54% of New Yorkers actually are less likely to vote for Cuomo because of his cashless bail policies. So this is a big issue across the country. And really for the people who were murdered earlier this summer in D.C., this could have happened a lot sooner, and maybe they'd still be alive. So there's a lot of real families that are affected by this. Yeah. And I think people really do want to have safe cities. So there you have it. And thank you to Charlotte and Mark. That is what we found out in this new poll, which was making waves. We had a number of really great coverage. Newsweek had a great story. Zoran Mamdani remains candidate to beat as Cuomo Adams slide. That's a quote for me, which is true. We'll go through that here in a second. However, there's more to that story. And then additionally, New York Post, despite Zoran Mamdani's past anti-cop stance, socialists still beating New York City Mayoral Race, poll shows. And then just over the weekend, Inside Sources syndication sent out my op-ed on crime, chaos, and the future of the Democratic Party to papers across the country, and maybe in your local paper they ran with it. But that really gets into how this isn't just about New York City, but this really does have an impact on the entire nation. And it shows a little bit of what is going on within the Democrat Party as to where the future is going. You know, really, you follow the energy, and where the energy is in the Democratic Party is really leading to a transformation. Some have suggested it might be that the Democrats might be going the way of the Whigs, that there's really been a collapse in the Democrat Party. But it might be a little bit, actually, kind of like the Whigs, but it's a transformation of the party is what's happening. You have the Democratic Socialist candidates like Mamdani and others, the louder voices that seem to be where the party's going. And you can see that in the New York City race. Those more traditional Democrats like Adams and Cuomo are beginning to lose their hold. And you wonder who is really going to be out there that could be another voice. And the traditional Democrats who want to get back in the game, they're embracing some of the heightened rhetoric or some of the more left-leaning stuff. So anyway, you can check that out, insidesources.com. And of course, you also can go to pollingclub.com to check that out. I think we have that posted on the page. So going into our new poll. So this is the actual poll. You can check it out. The big headline is that Zohran Mamdani really does remain the candidate to beat in the race, and that from our poll that we did right after the Democratic primary to today, that his lead, while it hasn't really expanded much, it has hardened a little bit and seems to be durable in the mid to high 30s. Now that is a function partly of the race having so many people in it, and the reason why he's leading at this point in our polling by 12 points over Cuomo is that he has a pretty strong, solid base, and but he doesn't really have too high that he can go. Like there truly is a ceiling, as we will see here in a moment as we go through this. And one of the things that really was the difference maker, of course, was crime, which we'll talk about in a second. So looking at this is really the breakdown of the horse race. So this has moved. I'll talk about this in a second where this has changed. So we did the poll right after the Democratic primary. This is our poll from last week. So if the November election for mayor were held today, who would you vote for? Zohran Mamdani, first place 36.9%, Cuomo at 24.6%, Curtis Sliwa at 16.8%, Eric Adams at 11.4%, and 7.5% are undecided. Now it's interesting from our poll back in July that Mamdani's only increased by 1.7. And considering that he's raising money and everything else, that is slightly surprising. Also, we'll talk about favorability in a minute. He's the only one with a positive net favorability. You'd expect to see a little bit more movement there. The big change, though, came with Andrew Cuomo, who doesn't seem like he's really joined the fight after his Democratic primary loss. And he's dropped 4.4%, so a little bit over 4%. So he's dropped from the high 20s to the mid 20s, as you see there. And that's partly because he's losing Democratic support in the city. And Mamdani is slightly consolidating that, but I also think there's some people moving to undecided. Then you have Sliwa, the Republican in the race, Curtis Sliwa. He's at 16.8%. That's actually an increase of 0.7%. So really, as far as a survey like this goes, it's pretty much stationary, but moving in the right direction. Then Adams slips a little bit, negative 2.4% from our last poll. So it really shows a race that hasn't changed much, other than Cuomo really not gaining any speed and losing support. And a lot of that comes from favorability ratings, which we'll get into a little bit more on each of the candidates. But just to give you a sense of where things are at, we've actually done 3 New York City polls over the last couple of years. Actually, our first one we did with Adams and Cuomo is one of the reasons why Cuomo decided to run. We actually showed back in late 2023 that if Cuomo got in the race, that he would beat Eric Adams in the primary. Now that's true. Eric Adams ultimately didn't run, but went the independent route. But Cuomo ultimately didn't know that Mamdani would end up in that race. So Cuomo's favorabilities dropped in every single poll that we've done for the last year and a half. So in December 2023, his net favorability, so that's his favorability, his total favorability minus his negative impression. So his number in our December 2023 was negative 4.4. So that was his net favorable, is negative 4.4. So he was less popular, but that's this day and age, that's not too crazy for a politician. Now, he'd probably be a lot worse if it was statewide or if it was another part of the country, obviously, but in New York City, heavily Democrat, that wasn't, that's not necessarily good either. But then his net favorable a little over a month ago in our first poll after the primary, he was negative 5.4%. And so you see he's starting to slide. This is crazy, though. In the last month and a half, he's dropped from that negative 5.4% to his net favorable now is negative 14.4%, which explains why you see the drop in his ballot position. I always look at the net favorability as a pretty good predictor of the future. And that kind of tells you without anything changing how things might go, which we'll talk about here in a second. Adams' favorability from that first poll we did in December 2023, negative 24 for the net favorability. So that's pretty terrible. One of the reasons why Cuomo at that time would have beaten him in a primary. Clearly, Cuomo had a better position. Then last month, hadn't changed much in a year and a half, but it was negative 27.8% was the net favorable rating for Adams a little over a month and a half ago. Now, in this new poll, as we leave August and go into the fall campaign, Adams was at a negative 35.1% net favorable. I mean, that's huge. And that's the kind of thing, Joe Biden was highly unpopular when he was in his last year of presidency. He never had a net favorable that was that low. So that's a big deal, and it gives you some backdrop. Now, it's interesting, Chris Lee with the Republican, we didn't test him a year and a half ago for his favorability, but his is basically unchanged at negative 8.9 and negative 8.7. So that's an indication that he's pretty stable, which also shows his ballot position is pretty stable. Now, on Mamdani, he has a +4 net favorability. That's not amazing, but in this day and age with politicians, that's not a terrible position to be in, and it gives you an indication that he probably inches up over the next few weeks unless people start talking about this next topic, which we tested a lot of stuff in the last poll, and then we wanted to spend some time on crime because this is a big national conversation, and you can see this is a big deal in New York City. It's a big deal nationally. Having been somebody who used to live on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., a lot of the Democrats flipped out when the president federalized the D.C. police and then brought in National Guard. About 2 weeks ago, I got a chance to thank the National Guard for their being there. And it is definitely welcomed by regular folks in the district. And I can tell you, as someone, I think when we lived on Capitol Hill, we just got used to running up against crime. Neighbor condo had a drug ring being run out of it. We had members of Congress live next to us, and then there's a drug ring being run out of there. We had that ended up with a double attempted homicide. One of them was an actual, the person died, murder. And it was really constant. Someone got stabbed at the metro stop near us. A guy got beat up outside of our building, on and on. I remember seeing an Uber driver getting out of the car to help somebody, and this guy must have been just drugged out of his mind, just came up and cold cocked him. This is kind of stuff that happened constantly within the district, and people really would like to see that change. So this is the backdrop of what you see nationally, but then there in New York City, this is confirmation that in a state in a city like New York, we have 85% say crime is a problem. But that's not the only thing. When you look at the people who consider it a very serious problem, it is almost 50%. The actual specific number there is 49.8%. So that's a pretty amazing thing to think that many people say it's a very serious problem. So clearly, this is a big deal for the city. Now, this is why when we ask the informed ballot later on, and when we asked Mamdani versus anyone else, that after talking about crime, we see the race flip. So that's why I would say that Mamdani is definitely the candidate to beat, but he's also very much still beatable, and people really have not touched him. You see a lot of stuff in the media right now talking about him on conservative media, but even like MSNBC and CNN talking about his defund the police background or his anti-Semitic comments in support for BDS, the anti-Israel movement, or his anti-Semitic globalized intifada, which we asked about last month. These are all things that are in the background for people who are really paying attention. The regular voters don't know about it yet, and you can see that they are much less likely to vote for him. So we asked about defund the police. We said Zoran Mamdani has been a vocal supporter of the Defund the Police movement and policies to cut NYPD funding. Does knowing this make you more or less likely to vote for him? And as you see, 23.8% say more likely. That's noticeably different than the other topics we talk about. Then less likely, 58.4%. So last month we asked a couple of questions, which I'll provide you here in a second with the details from that. But last month we asked people about the BDS and the intifada question. And in that case, we also asked about government-run grocery stores, which is a big deal. So the less likely to support Mamdani because of refusal to denounce globalized intifada was 52.5% less likely. And then government-run grocery stores, that was 53.8% less likely. His proposal to have government-run grocery stores in New York City, which a lot of people believe would push real grocery stores out. And between those three issues, though, with this new poll, defund the police, 58.4%. Now, interestingly, the people who are more likely, it's kind of crazy, but there are people who are more likely to support Mamdani because of globalized intifada and also government-run grocery stores. And the anti-Semitic stuff, 30% of voters in the city said, yeah, they're on board with that, which tells you that's where his floor is. Anybody who's saying that, they're sticking with their guy. Then with the government-run grocery stores, around 33%, so they're more likely to vote for him because of that. So that means a third of the voters are likely to stick with him, except when you talk about the defund the police. And specifically, we also asked about his proposal to disband the NYPD's Strategic Response Group, the SRG, the unit that responded to the recent Midtown mass shooting, the one where the guy was supposedly trying to get to the NFL headquarters and was going to commit his murder there. People don't like that. So the people who are less likely to support him or more likely to support him because of that, I mean, they're still, defund the police. And if this was in any other, part of the country, this would be a lot less, but more likely 23.8%. So that tells you that really this crime issue, for me, the anti-Semitic stuff is the absolute worst, but the defund the police is pretty terrible. So I don't know how you make a distinction between all that, but in the voters' minds, the defund the police in trying to disband the Strategic Response Group and pulling resources away from NYPD's policing efforts, that is, those are killer for the voters. Even the people who want government-run grocery stores and would like to have anti-Israel BDS policies, they are not on board with defunding the police because their family could be affected by violent crime. So my recommendation to anybody who doesn't like the idea, and when I was in New York City to release the poll and I was on Newsmax and other media talking about it, I talked to regular folks, people who weren't that political, but they're definitely in the anyone but Mamdani camp. So there's a growing group of people, but the problem is they're fractured. But this has not changed too much. So going on to, we also ask, where are his positions? Are they about right? Are they not progressive enough? Are they too extreme? And you can see here that 45% say too extreme. It was about the same last month. I think it was 45.5%. So that's no change. So there's a clear group of 45% plurality of the city, of the voters, who say that he is too extreme for the city. Now, that means there's 55% that are a mixture between about right, undecided, and not progressive enough. But clearly, the people who say he's about right plus not progressive enough, that's about where his support is. He actually probably could eke out a little bit more there if you add the 6.7 and the 33.9%. So that tells me that he taps out probably in around 40 to low 40s is his ceiling, especially if you go towards the defund the police and the crime message. He really will struggle to get above the low 40s. So that means that head-to-head race may not be the right thing for him, or it might be. I'm not quite sure. I do think that a three-way race, though, in our numbers seems to be the thing that makes a difference. If you think that he shouldn't be elected, you might think it's a great idea. You might think it's a great idea because he gets elected, Republicans are going to do pretty well in 26. You might think that he should be elected because you agree with him. You think he's great. By the way, if you want the poll, you can see here, go to pollingclub.com. You can check it out, download all the resources that go with it, join the polling club. You'll get all of our future releases, as well as the opportunity to suggest questions, suggest topics for future polls. And if you're an elite member, you get to determine the direction of an entire poll. We, of course, do it in our methodology and make sure that it's done correctly. But you can help determine what we find out about the American people or the city or somewhere else. We also recently did one about the South Carolina governor's race, which was fascinating. We had Attorney General Alan Wilson leading that race, Nancy Mace behind him, the Congresswoman, and that's going to be a real competitive race, it looks like. Nobody's running away with it yet. All right. None of this happens in a vacuum. That's the big thing I would say is my takeaway from this poll. By the way, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them, whether you're watching during the live stream on YouTube or on X or Facebook or wherever. I'll either respond to them here, or we'll go into the comments later and respond to those. But thank you for your input. I always appreciate that. So this race isn't happening in a vacuum, and you would think that with how people feel about the defund the police stuff and the anti-cop stuff with Mamdani, the anti-Semitic stuff, and with the government-run grocery stores, all these crazy policies. I mean, they liked his slogans, the affordability stuff, but when they pull back the curtain, they find some stuff that they really don't like. For the people who are paying attention, why isn't it that it's just a runaway for Cuomo? Well, the thing is, Cuomo's cashless bail, which we also tested, is not as bad, but it's pretty bad for him. 53.2% said that they're less likely to vote for Cuomo. It's also why, in my op-ed, I talk about Trump's new executive order on cashless bail. I think this is a winning issue for Republicans. Republicans are talking about doing a national crime bill, a la Bill Clinton back in the 90s. This is smart because this is about life and death for people, and these radical reforms that happened over the kind of the woke era where people lost their mind, the cashless bail stuff, people just scratch their head. And if you think that Cuomo is going to be better than Mamdani, when it was convenient to support this stuff that caused a lot of the violent crime or allowed for it to happen because the criminals were put back on the street, people questioned. So we asked the question: Andrew Cuomo supported and signed into law New York's cashless bail policy, which some critics believe is a key factor in rising crime in the city. Does knowing this make you more or less likely to vote for him? Now, to be clear, for people who don't know how the surveys are done, we're actually kind of walking through it the way we did. We asked the ballot question, we asked the favorability, all of that at the beginning before we introduce any kind of topics, any kind of issues, so that we can get a clean view of what the head-to-head is and understanding of where the race is. Then we talked about some of these messages, and we wanted to explore each of the four main candidates, kind of touch maybe one of the negative things about them, something that's related to crime, and we did that, and then asked some what we call an informed ballot question at the end, where we saw what happened with the movement. So moving on to so that's Cuomo's cashless bail. Now, this next thing, you have the other former Democrat, now independent candidate in the mayor. This is why the mayor keeps losing support, and really I don't dislike him. It's just obvious when you look at the numbers that things are not going so hot for the mayor. And really, this is why I call the race breadlines versus baggage. Everybody who could really step up and take on Mamdani, they all have serious baggage. And Adams' corruption charges really are, that's horrific. Less likely, 68.7%. That's nearly 69% say that they are less likely to vote for him because of that. And this is something people know about. In the last week, you had the Adams confidant or colleague giving a reporter cash in a chip bag, trying to, I guess, get good coverage. This is the kind of stuff that, unfortunately, it's going to follow the mayor around. And even if it's something that's unfair, like he had nothing to do with that, it just fits into the narrative. And nearly 70%, that's a big deal. So between that and his other issues, something else that we talked about a moment ago, the negative net 35% favorability, that's a killer as well. I mean, as I said, this is a predictor of where the future is going. So Mamdani has a slight net favorability that's positive, and then you have the mayor has a super negative net favorability, and you can just see that those two are going to be continuing to have distance between them. So really, in America's bluest city, the Democratic candidates have defund the police, cashless bail, and corruption all hanging around their necks, which is why in a moment we'll talk about you wouldn't expect the Republican to do great in the situation. And I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but there is an interesting thing about to take place. But some stuff that's not the numbers, it's not the polling, it's really about just kind of mechanical stuff on the ground. It's important about Adams, Cuomo, Mamdani, and Sliwa, is that the ballot is going to have Zohran Mamdani and it's going to have Curtis Sliwa on the party line. So they're going to be at the top of the ballot, and they're going to be easy to find. So you're going to have them up there. I think Mamdani will be in two places, the Workers' People's whatever party, and Sliwa will be in the Republican Party. He'll also be in a third party, I think, the Animal Lovers Party or something like that. I don't know how much the being on two lines matters, but the important thing is that they're going to be at the top of the ballot. Whereas because they had to go the independent third party route, both Cuomo and Adams are going to be down amongst all the crazy also-rans that come in on third party independent lines on the ballot. So they're going to be kind of in that mix. That won't have a big difference, but as someone who polls these things, we can't really replicate that. And that tells me that most likely Sliwa and Mamdani poll slightly better, or they don't poll as well as they might do on the actual ballot. And my guess is that Cuomo and Adams will poll slightly better, and they will not do as well on the ballot as what the polls say, by like 1% or so. But in a race where margins matter, that's a big deal. Now, another thing, this goes to the corruption, that because the corruption, a lot of it, if you've seen any of the interviews, actually looked into it, some of it definitely looks like political retribution from the Biden administration. But one thing that is definitely concerning and has a long-term impact is that there is a charge about straw donors. And New York City has this matching, or they have public funding for campaigns. This is one of the reasons why you can't expect most of these people to drop out because they've all gotten money from the taxpayers to run their campaigns. Consultants aren't going to want to get rid of that money, millions of dollars to just, so they're all going to have the money to run their campaigns. They're not dropping out. But there's one person who has been refused to get that taxpayer funding, and that is Mayor Adams, because of this charge of the straw donors. And what that means is that to get the public funding, I think this is probably what happened, is that they were trying to show that they had a certain number of donors, and in so doing, that there's probably fake donors in there, and that's one of the ways that you get more money from the taxpayer funding. And anyway, because of that charge, he's been refused any of those city funds. That's a big deal. It means he's not getting millions of dollars of influx of that cash like every one of the other major candidates in the race. So that's going to have an impact. So I would say for Adams, there's 5 numbers that are important. The negative net 35% favorability, that's a killer. The one of the other numbers in here, we asked, direction of New York City, 54% says going in the wrong direction. Then you have 69% saying they're less likely to vote for Adams because of the corruption charges. And then he's number 4 in every poll. And then finally, $0 in the public funding, campaign funding. That all tells me that he may not even be in the race all the way through election day. And as you'll see here in a moment, I do think that that's probably a smart idea. So we asked about Sliwa. So Sliwa's not been as talked about in the race, but you can see he's famous for his red beret. And he's the reason for that is he was the founder of the Guardian Angels, which a lot of people, younger people, aren't aware of what that is. But this is why he's actually an interesting candidate, with the crime as a backdrop, people being really concerned, having these be some of the worst issues for Mamdani and Cuomo, and Adams with his corruption charges. Obviously Adams had been a police officer, and he really did have a story to tell, but the corruption stuff really undercuts that. We actually did a 3-way question in our poll to see if one of them dropped out, what would happen. In Sliwa, so if we had a race where it was just Mamdani, Cuomo, and Adams gets 20% of the vote. But if we had a race that was Mamdani, Cuomo, and Sliwa gets 23%. So he marginally does better than the former or the current mayor. So that's an interesting thing that the Republican would do that. And one of the things we also saw in our poll, and you can go through and you can check out the crosstabs. I'll actually show you what that looks like. So here's the actual poll. And we do what we call heat mapped crosstabs. We have detailed crosstabs you can get if you're part of the polling club. But on the top line report that we put out there, you can see that we have these heat mapped, which means that they show where the strongest support is. And interestingly, for Sliwa, he's not quite consolidated the Republican electorate yet, which is interesting. That means that there's actually an opening for him to. Let's see. All right, so you look up here. There's in the Republican column, where Curtis Sliwa, so amongst Republicans, this is the second choice for mayor. All right, so the first choice for mayor, so you see that Curtis Sliwa, who's the Republican in the race, he's getting 52.8% of the vote. So that's that's great that he's gotten that much, but you would think that he would be getting 80, 90%. So right now, this is the problem with the fractured race, that he's not getting even the full Republican vote, and yet he's in third place in the race. And I would say if he was able to consolidate to 80, 90%, he would actually be in the ballot position where Cuomo is right now. If you start picking up some independents, which he's doing pretty well, those are split fairly evenly, though Zohran Mamdani still leads that slightly. So you can see that there's actually a possibility that a Sliwa character Republican could actually do fairly well in this race. So I'm not predicting that's what's going to happen. I think some things have to happen for that to be the case. But you can see we asked the question on the beret. So a lot of people don't know that was the thing that these folks would wear to help police or help provide support on the subways back in the 70s to reduce crime. And we asked this question because the New York Times had run an article recently saying that Slee was looking at getting rid of the beret. If he were to be elected mayor, he wasn't going to wear it. And he started taking it off at different kinds of events where he thought it was appropriate, like business-related events. And, there's a lot of kids out there who probably, it looks a little bit like a African dictator with the red beret. They have no context what that is. So it's interesting. So we asked, are you Chris Sliwa, founder of the Guardian Angels, has worn a bright red beret nearly every day since the 1970s as part of his group's uniform. According to the New York Times, Sliwa says he will take it off permanently if elected mayor. Does knowing this make you more or less likely to vote for him? And it's pretty much a wash. Less likely, 30.2%, and more likely, 28.3%, and 41.86% saying they're undecided. So this rebrand is actually pretty clever, and it's an opportunity. It makes people have to explain why he wears it and his background fighting crime, and the city was even in worse situations. So I think it's interesting. It doesn't look like there's much of a downside when you look at the very much less likely and much more likely. Those are negligible. So it's an interesting thing. As I said, if he consolidated the vote within the Republicans, he would actually be performing pretty close to where Cuomo is. One of the things that has to happen if someone's going to beat Mamdani, Cuomo has to run like he needs to run the campaign he should have run in the primary, where he works really hard to win over Democrat votes. Currently, he seems to be kind of playing footsie with the idea of getting Trump support. You get some sense that he's kind of trying to do that, or at least get it behind the scenes, as well as trying to court Republicans and independents. Well, the drop in his support has been largely from Democrats. And if people start talking about the cashless bail, he's going to lose all those Republicans and likely a lot of the independents. So he really needs to go and play for the Democrats. Now, he has not shown a lot of indication that he's really got the gumption like he used to. That's what most of the people I talk to in the city are saying about the race. So I don't know. I don't really know if he's got that in it. But if he were to stay in the race, and if he were to really fight to get the Democrats, or were to at least keep what he's currently got of the Democrat base there, and if the mayor dropped out, or if the mayor just becomes a non-factor, he's getting pretty close to that. But if he were to become a non-factor, with Cuomo siphoning off enough Democrats, and then you have Sliwa start to consolidate beyond the 53% or so of Republicans, getting closer to 80, 90%, that starts to look like, and starting to win over independents and in some Democrats, of course, but you start to see that there's a possibility that you would have Sliwa possibly pull this off. And I think that's very interesting, something that a lot of people aren't talking about, but that, the idea of everybody getting behind one candidate, and that being Cuomo, I don't know if that necessarily is in the cards because of the cashless bail stuff. But, this is another interesting thing. I'll just touch on it very quickly. We asked the Trump endorsement impact. 60.7% said less likely to vote for somebody who got that, 24.3% more likely. Now, on the face of that seems like it'd be a bad idea to have the president endorsed in the New York City mayor's race. And that's probably where I would stand on that. But when you look into it a little bit more deeply, it is interesting that of the people who say anyone but Cuomo, excuse me, anyone but Mamdani, that group of people is less likely to be upset by that. Actually, let me pull that up here. So the Trump endorsement, anyone else voters, it's closer to 35.5% less likely and 41% more likely to vote for somebody. So when you look at the anyone else, which after talking about crime and everything else, it flips to Mamdani losing to anyone else by 6.5%. And of that, anyone else vote, the Trump endorsement, a plurality, say it actually would make them more likely to vote for somebody. And you look at a three-way race, and again, if it's a three-way race, I think that's kind of an important component to it. And the Democrat vote might be split in that case. You would see that the winner's not likely going to get more than 40%. So the 60% that say they're less likely, not all of those are much less likely. Some of them are just somewhat less likely. They actually are not necessarily. That really doesn't. That's not enough of a percentage to stop that person from consolidating the anyone else but Mamdani vote and actually pulling it off. So, interestingly, that could have an impact. However, I think just the practicality of the race is that that's not going to happen, because if Trump were to support Cuomo would further lose his Democrat support, and he's not going to get all the Republican and independent, and you ultimately have him losing support, would be my guess, or just it's a wash. Whereas if he stays in the race and Trump got behind Sliwa would consolidate all those Republicans, possibly do a little bit better with some of the independents. Obviously not all of them, but those people who it doesn't work with, they're already with Mamdani out of that group. So the problem is that, as I understand it, Sliwa's not seeking that endorsement, and those two don't necessarily are not necessarily simpatico. So that actually, as I understand, is the less likely scenario. So and then to endorse Adams, as we've seen, would be just a complete waste. He's not just tanking. He has, politically, he has cement shoes, and continues to have no lift whatsoever. So I don't think that's going to be something that happens. Or if it does, I don't think it's the thing that's probably going to make a difference. However, in a different situation, that could be interesting. So, just kind of to close, this race is really, as you have the government run grocery stores, you have the crazy BDS and globalized Intifada, you have this, some people call him Marxist Mamdani or Mamdani the commie. Also, we've watched him bench press recently. People call him Scrawny Mamdani. That was pretty hilarious to see. But it's really kind of shaping up to be breadlines versus baggage in this race. And I think that while Mamdani's affordability slogan sold, the policies behind it don't. And that's his biggest problem. And if, as we go into the fall campaign here with Labor Day behind us, you're going to see money start opening up, and regular voters are going to start hearing about his crazy position. So I would expect that we do another survey here sometime in the next month or so, and I would expect to see the race shift. And, everything I've said here, if that race does shift, and if it really does sink in that these policies, this is what he would do, you will see him go from where he's starting to approach his ceiling right now. I think he's about 5 points away from his ceiling, but that would be a winning number. He's already a winning number, but he would start dropping to his floor, which I think is about 33%, and then the opportunity for somebody to pull this off happens. So I think it is anybody. It's Mamdani's race to lose, but I also think he has so many ways to lose it. And there are many ways to win it for someone else, but if things don't change. But I think the money's going to be there to have that happen. And normally in races, things do consolidate. Even if no one drops out, people become non-factors, and you start to see things happen. So anyway, thank you. If you'd like to get the poll, go to pollingclub.com. You can check that out, and I'll put that up on the screen for anybody who wants to do that. And so go to pollingclub.com to get this poll, future polls, help us decide what to cover. And then also, political trade secrets. You want to be a political trade secrets insider, go to politicaltradesecrets.com, sign up for to be an insider. You get notifications for these episodes as well as other resources. And we have some new things coming up that you can find out before other people. And then, of course, the big thing is to like and subscribe on YouTube, X, Facebook, whatever your favorite podcast platform is, Apple, Spotify. It really does make a difference for the show if you can like, subscribe, and follow wherever you enjoy this and other podcasts. We really do appreciate it. But thank you so much for spending some time with me to talk about this important race. This is the biggest and most important city in the United States for our economy, for culture, and it's an important city to the people who live there, and who, the rest of us look at it like, it's an interesting thing to watch. But for the people who live there, they're going to have to suffer under these kinds of policies going forward. So, all of us wish them best, regardless of what happens. They'll be able to survive whatever it is. But, we wish them the best. But it's really been a fun race to track polling over the last year and a half, and as we continue to do so. So again, please like and subscribe on YouTube, X, Facebook, or your favorite podcast platform. I really appreciate you spending some time with us as you come out of your Labor Day weekend to look at the fall campaigns and to really think about where our country is going, and to join us for some insights as to what really happens behind the scenes to kind of decode politics and how it actually works. So with that, thank you very much and have a great day. We'll see you on the next Political Trade Secrets.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes, and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.